His role also involves driving change and innovation in patient safety across the health and social care system in Northwest London earlier in his career. Kenny was a physiotherapist, and he later held a role in clinical economics and factors in the NHS and local authority prior to joining the partnership. He held a director role in a consultancy providing risk management service to the NHS, local authorities, and the private sector. He has two masters, not just one, two, okay, because he knows what he's talking about. Firstly, in economics and human factor from University College London, and secondly, in integrated governance in healthcare. Kenny has a huge range of public sector as well as commercial and consulting experience. Please put your digital hand together for Mr. Kenny Ajayi.
Thank you. Thank you very much for those very kind words, Action Jackson. And I want to say very good evening to every one of you. You have no idea what a joy and a delight it is for me and for Morenike to be hosting you tonight. And I want to just extend a very, very warm welcome to you. And it's great to be in a virtual room with nearly 200 people across the face of the earth, maybe. And I find something very interesting and exciting about these virtual environments. We didn't choose the virtual environments. It got thrust on us by the pandemic. One of the things I found exciting about this, as Action Jackson said earlier, is that the longest commute I have done in the last 9 months has been down or up one flight of stairs. I really like that. It's amazing. I like that sort of commute. But tonight I want to just have a conversation with you. It will be a very short conversation, but nonetheless, it's a conversation. And I want to reflect on the year 2020 at the expense of stating the obvious, or at the risk, I should say, of stating the obvious. 2020 has been the most remarkable and the most destructive year, perhaps in our living memory. You can say that without fear of contradiction. And as I reflect on 2020, there are two things that come to my mind. The first thing that comes to my mind is that human beings are a lot more fragile and life is a lot more mortal than we think. In other words, 2020, in a very unique way, has brought home to me the fragile nature of the human existence, but also, very importantly, the mortality of human life. That's one. The second thing that sticks on my mind when I reflect about 2020 is the fact that change has become the new norm. We used to talk in the previous decade, we used to talk about change management as though we could put change in a box, build a wall around it, and control it. But now we live in a time, an epoch of time, when change has become the norm. So we're in a disruptive era. Now, that's interesting because now I'm going to ask you to engage with me in a moment. I'm going to throw a few names out at you, and I'm going to ask that we have a conversation via the chat. I'll throw a name out at you, and as soon as you hear that name, I'm going to ask you to put something in the chat, the first thought that comes to your mind, whatever that thought happens to be, whether it's a name or a phrase or a word or something. Once I call out that name, put that in the chat. So let's start with John F. Kennedy. Throw out in the chat the first word that comes to your mind, or the first thought, or the first phrase that comes to your mind. J.F. Kennedy. Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa. Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King is our third one. Martin Luther King. And our fourth name is Florence Nightingale. Florence Nightingale. Florence Nightingale. And finally, we have Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill. So 5 names. Now, I am not a mind reader, and I haven't had the benefit just yet of looking at what you've written in the chat. But let me tell you something I know. 2 things I know about what you've written in the chat. The first is this, that if we were to aggregate everything you've written on each of those names, there will be an overriding theme or trend that associates, or that you've associated with those names. The second thing I know for a fact is this, that each of the things you have written about those people associates them with their legacy. So for example, John F. Kennedy, you probably wrote something along the lines of dynamic leadership, putting a man on the moon. And for Mother Teresa, you probably wrote something along the lines of standing for the cause of the underprivileged, or kindness, or something along those lines, something along the lines of compassion. And for Florence Nightingale, you probably wrote something along the lines of healthcare, along the lines of nursing, along the lines of infection control. And for Winston Churchill, you probably wrote something along the lines of courageous leadership in difficult times. And the list goes on and on. Now, let's leave that there for a minute and permit me to talk about what Career Nugget has been busy doing in the last year or so. And I've got a few stats here just to make sure that I don't forget anything important. So we have had 2,000 people engage with us at our various events, seminars, webinars, workshops, annual events. 2,000 different individuals have engaged with us. We've had 50 young people between the ages of 16 and 18 who have been helped into work in some shape or form. We've had 48 different episodes of our flagship event, Career Nuggets, on the Sky platform, channel 193, Vox Africa, and that hears now 4 times a week. We've had 20 positive role models at our annual gala event and award nights. We've had 10 families who have been financially supported or helped in some shape or form, especially during the very intense disruptive period of the early part of this year. And finally, we provided 200 individuals with some kind of mentoring support or another. So that's what we've been busy doing for the last year or so. Now, let me come back to my story. Now, I have been in reflective mode for the past 1 month, practically since the beginning of November. And I'm getting to that age in life where you start to think about legacy. And my challenge to you tonight is that what legacy are we going to leave, not just as individuals, but as a corporate body, as a corporate people? What legacy are we going to leave as a community? And here are my final words on this. I challenge you tonight that you join us as a community, as a Career Nugget vision, to leave a legacy for the next generation. Because what we achieve sets the starting point and the starting point for the next generation to build on. There are 4 things I'm going to ask you to do with us, or 4 things I'm going to ask you to do for us. First is to, if you're in a situation where you can influence corporate entities, corporate organizations, that you influence, make that influence happen and raise sponsorship, corporate sponsorship for Career Nuggets. Second thing I'll ask is that not just provide corporate sponsorship, but also amenities, venues, facilities, in kind donations from corporate organizations. The third thing I'll ask is that we need ambassadors. We need people out there who will talk about the good work that we do and will spread the word abroad. And finally, we still need mentors. We still need role models. And I'll say this one final story. Literally yesterday, I had an email from a very elderly mentor of mine. And she said, Kenny, I need you to do me a favor. She says, I know somebody who is of an ethnic minority background that needs some mentoring and really desperately needs some mentoring. She says, do you happen to offer mentoring? Would you like to speak to this person and help them through this difficult time in their career? Of course, I wrote back to say yes. And if you're able to support us on these 4 things, it gives us the ability and the resources and the wherewithal to continue to do this kind of work and to scale it up several times. So let's make up our minds tonight. Let's make up our minds that our generation will be one that will help the next one to start from a higher level, not just by the things we achieve, but also by the building blocks that we build for them. Thank you very much for listening, and it's such a joy to be in the room with you tonight. Thank you so much.